Hello everyone, in this video we're going to be taking a look at the latest UniCon container template and making some critical changes that are going to make it that much better for everybody. Now this comes after about a year of being released, and not just that, we have a highly anticipated add-on that has been worked on so hard by Arcades, and I'm super excited to present it here soon. Just a little flashback here. So here is the actual creation that started everything, and you could see it was posted on February 8th, but of course I had been working on it for over a month at that point, so it's almost a year since it's been out, and we've made substantial changes along the way, starting off with added buttons, features, and now you'll see kind of some of the things that are really going to make it hit that next level. But what's awesome is just the amount of other users that have adapted this system. I gotta say, if I'm proud of any one of my creations, it's this, funny enough, because my creations that I make myself are awesome to me, and I know a lot of people use them and appreciate them, but for me to actually end up in a system where we have people making and basing their own creations on this, I just think that's absolutely instrumental. I mean, there's 8 pages you could see here, over 200 entries. Now, of course, a lot of them are my own, but not all of them. I would say maybe my own are about half. So I highly recommend you go take a look and see what some other users made, because it's really cool to kind of have a system and a creation or a template that has been so widely adapted. And hopefully with the release of this awesome add-on by Arcades, I anticipate and hope that it's going to be even more and more. Sadly enough, I've not been updating my template creation, so this is something I have to do. And you'll see here in the template, I had joint buttons for release H4, which are the bottom connectors, as well as parachute. Release the main track, release the UniCon, and the perpendicular track, which are these guys here and these guys here. And so I'm convinced that there's something I can do to make it better. And then of course button 3 would be if you have like a door or something, you can have it open. Now what I do, or what I have explained before, is these ones here have battery power, allowing them to do stuff like this, whereas these ones, the whole purpose of them is to be very manual and not even have battery power. But that may change. I may have to put a battery or some other form of electronics that are just going to make it work if I decide to do the same thing with this kind of crate as I do with the cargo container. So that's my definition. I call this the crate and I call this the cargo container itself. So you could see very useful system. And if you've not been paying attention here, you'll notice that this one has the parachute, this one does not. So there's different symbols here. When you see the orange one, that means it actually comes with the parachute. My own effort is my own demise, as you can see with so many UniCon containers and things. A lot of them are still using the original version of the microcontroller, and actually this isn't even the original. This is already version 1.5. So I went through 5 iterations to get to this point, adding these secondary buttons. But when Arcades joined along with making and pretty much putting in a ton of effort into getting and developing this add-on for the UniCon, he developed this fantastic system that I then later took and tweaked a little bit. So it ended up being a joint effort. You could see this is 1.6, and you could see AECs right here. So this is a groundbreaking system, because now instead of using those kind of analog buttons that allowed pretty much no battery power, we can now put this and it tells us in which direction we're pushing it. So if you're here and you're wanting to push it like this, you could see that pressing this is the main track, so now it's like this. On this side here, if we press main track, that's this way, right? The arrow's pointing in that direction. Whereas here, if we press this, it's now left and right when you're this direction, or here it's into the page, if you will. So that was an awesome effort by Arcades, and it brought a visual to this. So now if you are pushing this thing, you have an idea of which side it's unlocked on. But with the development of the add-on came some issues. This add-on works really nicely with airdropping your UniCon containers in, and that way you can kind of collect your money. So what you do is you fly over top, but now you come across an issue where when you release your H4, that also engages your parachute. Now I wanted to minimize the microcontroller size, but ended up with the situation. So if I release the perpendicular track, off it goes. If I release the H4, we get our parachute now. Look at that. And then if I release the perpendicular, off it goes. So that's not terrible in that situation, but it doesn't look great, and it's kind of weird. Like, it adds an added pressure of quickly you gotta go and disable the right button and all that stuff to get it to deploy properly. So let's take a look at if we can add individual buttons. I can take this as a starting point. It's a very simple microcontroller that has lobster pots, but what I'm trying to do is replicate it for having a parachute, because the parachute system is quite nice on these UniCon containers. I would say one of the biggest advantages, in my opinion, of this containerized system. So we could put that there, but now what we have an issue with is the microcontroller. So you can see this is the latest revision that I kind of tweaked since Arcades gave his suggestions, which was to have this nice display. And fantastic system, but let's see how we can divide it any further. Now, again, the biggest issue is the physical limitation of space, right? I didn't really want to make this a longer microcontroller. Of course, if I did that, we could fit everything, but without going into too much detail, I truly think that it's inevitable, and we'll just have to find the space, I guess. So you can see right now, this is alone release the main tracks. This one here is the release H4 connectors and parachute, which in my opinion is a mistake. Like, not a mistake, but not ideal. And then over here, release UniCon side connectors, release perpendicular track sliders. So this is also two of them. So quite simply put, having an extra two nodes is going to make all that difference. And as annoying as it is to increase the size, especially at this time, I do think it's unfortunately inevitable to really maximize the potential of the UniCon container system. So you see parachute would be here, and that one is the perpendicular, and that is the same one that we'd have to release our side UniCon connectors. So release side UniCon connectors. So what's important is understanding which connector is which. So this is what I refer to as the side UniCon connector here, because that is the mechanism that picks up the that's picked up by the vehicle, and it does include these two. Now these ones aren't as important because they're really only used by vehicles for picking it up, whereas these are super annoying because if you put two of these containers side by side, this is what will cause most of your ships to sink, most of your trucks to glitch out, is if you put it down in a place where these two nodes are too close to one another, like this. Even if they're sitting on electrical connectors and the liquid connectors here, this will be the bane of your existence. So it would be nice to disable that separately, and hence the other button. And then of course, like I said, we have the parachute, which is self-explanatory. We have our H4 corner connectors, which are these guys. And we have the main direction, which is this. And we have perpendicular direction, which is this. Within the microcontroller interface here, you can see we got a bunch of different channels. A lot of them. And what is actually happening here is if we go back out here, the way that the composite here is daisy chained one to one another, like this, all the way through and back in, the only way to give a proper command was to set different channels. So here we have 1, 2, 3, 4. Over here we have 5, 6, 7, and then we have the radial, And over here we have another 8, 9, and 10 right here. So you could see that between all these different microcontrollers, they couldn't be on the same channel because they're all giving separate instructions. So that's why you need this OR. So you have 4, or whatever this one is here, 7, or whatever this one here is, 10. So it accounts for the 3 different controllers, and here are the buttons. So H4 connector, main track sliders, perpendicular track sliders. So now what we have is 2 new ones here, and we actually get to add new composite channels. We get to add a new instrument panel, and we get to add some other features that I think are really, really cool with this radial segment. Just to make diagnostics easy, I actually put a tooltip for each one of these, so we always get to see what is happening with our microcontroller. We have, of course, the optional channel, which is opening of doors and whatever, and an optional pivot. So each one of these are optional. And here I went ahead and added this. So 2 things. 11 is going to be your releasing the UniCon side connector. And we have 12, which is the parachute. Now, something I thought of which was super, super awesome for me is parachute delay time. And not just that, it actually turns on a blinker that blinks on the top of the microcontroller. So what happens is same old, everything works, except now we also get this here. But in essence, release the main track. Now, yeah, this isn't in this direction here, so maybe I do have to adjust this one in particular, we'll see, but on this side it's quite clear. And over here, perpendicular, so this is left and right in this instance. Here it's not. Maybe I just changed the coloring, to be honest. Anyway, that, and now if I go ahead and press the side connectors, oh, look at that, we got yellow for the side, so that's these ones here, and then the bottom is H4 here in white. So everything is color coded on this. It's too bad we can't paint the physical part here, and I don't really want to paint the whole block, it'll get really annoying, but in my template I will. Anyway, check this out. Say I want a parachute. Oh, it's flashing, and when that light comes on, that is the parachute being opened. So that system is intentional and will work in a way that you get to deploy your parachute. See, flashing, and of course we've already deployed it, but watch this, and boom. So it really does allow you to turn off the H4, move the thing into position if you got to, and then release the parachute before the whole thing just shoots right out of your airplane. Now, granted, when you're flying in an airplane and the air kind of pressure is pushing this, it may just fly out anyway. But for that reason is why I made it on a timer. So you actually have yourself some time, right? What you can do is, in essence, you'll turn on your parachute, push the H4 and start to push it out, and then it will turn on. So it's not going to engage instantly and kind of hit parts of the airplane on its way out. I went ahead and placed a new composite right here, attached this into the daisy chain, and took all of these things here, placing them back where they were, except I replaced 2 of them. I replaced the perpendicular track with the main direction track, and I can't have it both on channel 18, otherwise it'll cause a bunch of conflict. So what I can do is take channel 18, add 8, and that is the channel I can put it on, or I can just go ahead, if I don't want to count, and put it on, say, channel 30, and it'll have 8 of them. So with that done, I can go to this, set this also to channel 30, and that should allow the system to nicely tell us where we're going. So main track, in this case, you're looking at pushing it like this. In this case, it's left and right. Then perpendicular track, well, I could push it like this, or in this case, left and right. When I press the parachute, it's always the top one that blinks. When I push H4, it's the bottom 2 that activate, and when I push release UniCon, it is these side 2 that activate. Now, what's also cool is within the microcontroller here, I can set my parachute delay time. I mean, I don't want to get crazy and have a keypad here, because then you could really set the time it'll take to parachute, but I'm trying to still keep it relatively optimized. So that is one of those things where I think that just having it as a number you could set is pretty good. Now remember how I mentioned these side ones will always glitch out and start to do all kinds of weird funky stuff when we place it on a rack or track with like this? Well, one thing that would be logical to do would be that once we've connected ourselves to one of these, that this instantly turns itself off, right? Because right now we could release the side connector, but wouldn't it be nice that if it's sitting on a track, it's released? However, that would include adding a new node to this, which I don't really want to do. So instead, what I can do, you see here, once I find it, perpendicular tracks, here is the UniCon side, and this one here gets activated. You push this, it releases the UniCon side connector. The only place to currently release the side connectors is here, and it is a toggle button, so it just stays on and those stay on. But one thing that I'm almost kind of debating or thinking is I could make it start off already toggled, and then you push this to actually, rather than releasing it like this, you push it to enable it. My only fear of doing stuff like that is it's kind of in contrast to this, whereas this is the release of the H4. But you see, because these aren't toggle buttons, it really doesn't matter. Like, you could toggle it to enable the side connections, and then you'd be able to lift it up in a vehicle, and then you can go and disable it. But you know, if you know how to use these things, then I guess that shouldn't come as a surprise. You are very much capable of, once you bring it and place it in a vehicle, you can have this toggled, and then you end up with a release. Because you see, this display shows releases like that, and these are now currently all released. But just let's test it out. In here, it's as simple as putting a knot. So that is knot. And if we follow the tracks, these are also not. This is not, and not. In this case, this wouldn't be release, it would be activate UniCon side connectors. And if we spawn that in, we should see that right now, these are released. So currently, default is they are released. And if I press this, I actually activate them. They become usable. Turn this off. Now they're released. So in a default setting, you shouldn't end up with physics kind of taking over and clipping things together. I don't know which way is better. Like, it comes down to, do you want to activate it so you could pick it up with a vehicle and then deactivate it once it is in place, or vice versa? Really, it's the same thing. Ultimately, I think pressing it to release it does make a little more sense. It is kind of consistent with what we've had, and it still kind of annoys me or upsets me that slider brakes are here. I really thought about trying to merge it in, but with the space constraints, I mean, I could take this to the whole next level and just keep doing crazy stuff, but I'm still trying to keep this microcontroller relatively small and easy to use. So I think just this gives us the right level of control that I'm looking for here. This will require kind of a bit of a, not major, that sounds a bit dramatic, but it will require some revamping of even these microcontrollers here, just to get the system all kind of ready for what I'm trying to do here in the test example. So you can see, even just by putting this there, that's not enough. I gotta grab these units and place them within each of these templates. So it's not my favorite thing to do, to just spend a lot of time revamping things that had previously been working, but in the case of this, I actually do believe it's quite justified. As you see, it's a big difference, and I hope that this will really allow you to make the most of the UniCon system, whereas previously it was still good, and I'd say for trucking and stuff it was probably fine, but really to get proper air travel, and not just proper air travel, but to get proper usage out of it without kind of glitching into one another and having unintended physics happening, this is probably a far superior system. The daisy chaining of the Composite is the most difficult. You can see that it just kind of goes through a sequence of data nodes and back in, but once that's been complete, the rest of it's fairly easy. So now we have release UniCon side, and here we have parachute. In this case we don't have a parachute, so for that one you wouldn't even have anything to put. Of course that is optional, just like it is optional to use this button. So this release lobster pot button is actually what I called kind of an optional usage button. So now I linked it to the optional channel 3 button. That's the whole purpose of it. So in this case that would be attached to this, and parachute is also in this case, if equipped, optional. I mean, I'm assuming if you are taking on the UniCon system in your own creations that you are changing the naming of the buttons so it does align with what it is you're actually trying to do, so it doesn't cause issues. Like, you don't need a parachute button if you don't have a parachute, so in that case just go ahead and scrap it. Now we'll plug everything in to the electric and let's see if it works. So release perpendicular is in this direction for us, and we got to release H4. Now with that released, we should be able to push it over. Oh no, we've released perpendicular. Okay, now we've linked up ourselves up to the next one here, so we could release the UniCon side and drag this back here. Okay. Okay, so now if I want to get it going in the main direction, okay, so what I've done is it's actually released in the main direction. It is a little interesting, it's almost backwards. You can see here, so let us bring in, it's now connected to the H4. Okay, so I want to push it in the perpendicular direction, so you don't actually want to release it in the perpendicular, you want to release the main. Okay, so now the main is released and H4 is released, and now we can do this. Okay, so it's a little counterintuitive, I suppose, because what you're now in essence doing is you are pressing the opposite of what you're trying to do. So that is that. Now I want to go in the perpendicular. Okay, and now I can push it. So we have released the main direction and we are pushing it in perpendicular. So I may want to adjust that so it's a little more counterintuitive, so it actually shows you the side that you are able to push it in. Like if I go here and I want to push it in this direction, it actually releases it in that direction. There may definitely be an advantage to doing kind of the opposite, if it makes sense, and rather than everything starting off enabled, we have the choice and we slowly enable what we want rather than just purely going off of kind of a situation where you may or may not want to do a certain thing. It's definitely a little more intentional, if that makes sense. So now rather than release, it's enable main track. So then really the only one that we are releasing is the H4 connectors, if that makes sense. But now we're enabling main track, and here, I mean, I have release UniCon, but I also could have it enable. So I'm not going to rename all of them, but let's just see how it works with the arrows. So previously I would actually, so now everything is lit up. Okay, I don't like that. I actually want it to be lit up if I am able to use it. But now if I press this, does that mean I could push it in this direction? It does. Okay, so that I like. I just don't like that these are off now. That's a simple fix. I just shouldn't have attached the knot to all of this. So whatever I have here, I have to put it back to the original one and have the knot only going to the actual controller itself, which is connected to the actual releases. To make H4 match and not have it opposite, which would be a little bit confusing, like you'd enable main track but then disable H4. Rather than that, what we can do is actually have enable H4 connectors here, but for these they actually start off default, and that may be the way to do it. So we have here all of these will activate it, and now we'll just actually have it on as well as the not function. To do that, all I'm going to do is put a constant on with a pulse, and that pulse will just for a second hit this boolean, which is set for a bunch of ors, and it'll just enable it from the get-go. So now you can see that we have the bottom already enabled, and if I press this, then they become disabled. So enable it, it pops on, and of course we also have the tracks themselves. So we could enable it to go in this direction here, release this, and now we should be able to slide it here. That's a much sort of straightforward system. Okay, then that's there. Okay, I have to see why those aren't working, but in essence, now if we want to go in that direction, we can release H4 and it'll just be able to go there. Perfect. So gotta fix why these displays aren't turning on here. I did rejig where the buttons are because I wanted them to be in a sort of up-down manner rather than diagonal. Okay, much better. So now it is actually on. So we could make all of these starting off on default. Like I said, it is a little bit more intentional that way. You kind of, but like this, it's more intentional where you already know what you're doing versus in a situation where everything's just on and it's utter chaos for you to kind of disable certain things until they're all disabled. So in this case, I kind of like we have our UniCon on, and I'm going to see how I do this. I think I will start with it on by default, and then you could release it, and then you have these various other buttons. Very easily, I can apply this to all of these Boolean functions and have all of these start off on by default. I do spend a lot of time thinking about the actual practical implication of all of my designs. So something like this, for me now this dial doesn't show releases, it shows enabled. So for example, we know our H4 are enabled. We know our perpendicular and main track are enabled. We know that. Now, do we know that these are released? So that's opposite to what we're trying to do. So you press the button, that should be to press to enable them. Or it shouldn't be a press to enable, but it should start off already enabled here on the display, and when I press this off, then these also turn off. So in essence, very simple, it's this going to the not function. So whenever this is not pressed, then we have those lights coming on, telling us that it is in fact enabled. So you can see now everything starts enabled, and you could now disable certain things, which makes the buttons a little difficult to understand because now we have enable, enable, enable. This one's release. This one, when I press enable, it actually releases it. So a little confusing, but nothing a little bit of labeling can't work on. So now everything is just a button. So H4 connectors, and then the radial tells us what is enabled. So it says connectors enabled, and the only one that actually does disable the thing is this. When you push this, it actually releases the side connectors. Everything else stays on. Now, I could make this not be, I could just make it a push button as well, and I think it'll be a little bit more uniform in that case. So UniCon side connectors, and then in here all I have to do is make the same sequence. In this case, everything is on like we just did. We can press this, we release the H4, and it just says connectors enabled. So we press this, it releases the side. We press this, we release our H4, and if we want to have it pushed in this direction, we now got to turn off our main track, so leaving our perpendicular. I mean, potato, like, one can overanalyze this forever, but the show has to move on. So in this case, I mean, I think it just makes logical sense to me that the one that's enabled is on rather than the one that is disabled. So we have that on, we turn off these, and if we want to have something else going, we can turn them on. So really now you're just turning things on rather turning things off, and we have our parachute that just flashes the top one, and boom, it gets opened or enabled. I've got all of the containers with the new style, you can see, so we can slowly disable things we don't want until finally it's ready to go. So that's one thing. But now, what about the crates? Like I said, the whole purpose of them was to not have any electrical, right? But now with this system, it seems that we have to introduce some electrical for sort of a really good cause, if you will. Well, this may be blasphemous, but let's see what happens. So now I've made a smart crate, if you will, and same thing, we're going to go ahead and put the new 2.0 microcontroller with the new connections, which is taking this one, attaching it there, and taking this one, attaching it there. Because I really like being hard on myself, I don't like the location of the radial dial here, because what if, like this crate, or like any of these, it doesn't have a parachute? I'm picky like this, I just don't like how that looks. I want them to at least be bunched together, so now I have to move them all. So now the buttons are in their proper place. Like I said, if it doesn't have a parachute equipped, we actually could remove that parachute button. So then depending on if it is a parachute style of container. But now one thing that we have to consider, or the last thing we have to consider, is this one, which is the crate. So how do we get power to this? Do I want to put a battery? I'm not quite sure. Now, I think that I may have a bit of a solution in the form of a solar panel, because if I recall, a solar panel retains some form of energy. Like, what if I just put it on these electric ones? So you can see it actually is charging up, funny enough. Pressing these doesn't actually drain the battery, which is nice. So it takes a second for them to come online, but then you still have a unit that is pretty much without any type of charge, and it just sticks around and we can now use it properly. So I think that may be a fine kind of middle ground, if you will, that will allow me to still give this unit this nice new connection style, but not have it something that's powered. Of course, this one has charging plugs and stuff. This one doesn't, and that's the whole point. So in that case, instead of putting it up here where someone could accidentally delete it, why don't I put it right here next to the actual control panel? So now they're just right beside one another, and hopefully, even though you don't see it, because I don't really want to make it obvious that it has that solar panel, it still does hopefully get powered by it. And one last small thing, these pivots, if you have infinite electric on, they will never open for you because it'll be fighting you every step of the way. So what we actually have now are these compact pivot power that just allow free movement no matter if you have infinite electric or not. So this is probably the most logical thing to place for these, even though I don't really love how that kind of hole, the RPS hole, looks. But sometimes the practicality of something outweighs some aesthetic things. So now with the crate itself, you have these pivots. Yeah, they look not great, but if we go ahead and unlock our crate, boom, you can open it. So it does give you a little bit of extra purpose here with the game when you have this, and you can see these are charging right up, so it should be fine even for the crates. The one thing to keep in mind is that with the crates, the brakes are actually integrated into the same thing that releases your container. So you can see here it says unlock crate and track brakes. So one of the downsides, I mean, I could put another button here, and if you're not using your parachute, you have the ability to put track brakes. Like, I mean, the world is truly the oyster with something like this. Maybe that is the best thing here. So you actually do have track brakes as a on-off output, and then, like I said, parachute is optional and track brakes are also optional. So it does give you a little bit of wiggle room, a little bit of play, where you have some more control over what it is we're trying to accomplish here. And of course, there's still a large amount of UniCon containers that have the space for a larger microcontroller, and then in that case, yes, you could put brakes there. You don't have to have them here, all that stuff. But then we come across things that are so crazily compacted like this, where this itself is a microcontroller, this a microcontroller, this. Where do you put it? Like, it's one of those things where maybe, like you see here, I could probably put a battery here, expand this, so there's still some wiggle room to be had, just not as much as we would have hoped. And actually, this is where I really hope the developers implement what they said in one of those Q&A sessions, is to put overlapping different types of nodes over top of each other. So you would actually be able to make this small. It'd be a 2x3, and you just have your composites and these two node regular kind of Boolean nodes in the same place. Now I totally feel like I've just taken this to the next level, and I'm just straight up spinning in circles, making this way too complicated. But take a look at this. Track brakes optional with a nice little blinker. And what that's going to look like is it'll show up on the bottom of the dial. So when you have your track brakes on, your H4 ones blink. If you have H4 off, it still blinks. So really, it's blinking, telling you that your track brakes are on. Whether or not you have the connector enabled for the H4 and the tracks are on, or the track brakes are on, or if you have it off and the track brakes are on, they're just going to flash. How cool is that? So now, in theory, this thing could end up being a whole 5 blocks long. But that is in my example ones. I'm kind of going to do this. Of course, you have the ability and possibility to make it less long in your creation or change the shape, all that stuff. I'm really just showing the possibility you have in the system that I've developed here. So yes, now it really is getting quite complex and large, but as long as one has the space, and in the case of most of these, I think you would have the space. It really comes down to if you're like those crazy modular containers. In that case, like, you'll just have to think of something creative, I guess, or it just won't be possible. You'll be out of space, you'll have some size restrictions, and it is kind of what it is at that point. One thing that will make this easier to swallow is I'm going to not have the release UniCon here. Instead, I'm going to place it here and leave all of my optionals here at the end. So then you still have, if you don't have a door, if you don't have parachute, if you don't have a track brake, you could still make it a 3x2. I think that's kind of probably a fair middle ground, I think, if we just have it such that everything is on here like that. To prevent it from discharging, I actually went ahead and put solar panels right next to the control panel of each and every one of these. And now we don't actually need these solar panels on the top. Of course, if you want to put them, you can, but they're not a necessary part of the creation as they were previously. So it just gives you a little bit more flexibility in what to do, at least on these templates like this, while kind of hiding the solar cell here. That took way longer than I thought, but in the end, I'm very happy with this final product. It just looks so much more polished. It feels like a proper system, and the nice thing is your old UniCon containers are still absolutely compatible. It just, if I get a chance to revamp my existing fleet of UniCon containers, well, they can follow this. And if I don't get a chance, well, of course, they're still good as they are, without any other issues, really. So that is awesome. I'm really happy with how this all turned up. Let me know in the comments what you think, if I went off the rails or if this is something that was needed to really make the parachute function work properly and integrate the slider brakes. You know, we don't have the back button, like this button I didn't delete, but for the rest of them, we now have a unified and singular location for the track brakes. And while yes, we have a bigger microcontroller, ultimately you can chop it down if you don't have these things, and if you have some, you can reconfigure it as you need to. So anyway, I think this is a fantastic place where I wanted to get these UniCon containers, and I think that I'm super excited to see what Arcades has done with the add-on. I know that he also developed some of his own systems, so I don't think that the controls that I've put here are going to match with his. Okay, so don't expect this exact identical system, but this is sort of the one that I'll be implementing on my vehicles and on my containers. Whereas for Arcades, I assure you that what Arcades has done and made will be fantastic for the add-on and for usability. It's been under a lot of testing, and I'm super excited to test it out, review it, make a video, and participate in playing in that, because it's so cool. Anyway, I do want to give a huge shout out to all of my supporters. You guys are awesome. I really appreciate your extra contribution and participation in my community. That's one of the reasons I do this, so I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. And of course, I wouldn't be here without all of you, without the whole community, without all of you commenting, participating, joining in on the discussion, on the conversations, being a part of this community, all that good stuff. I think it's absolutely instrumental for what we're trying to do here, and that is kind of teach everybody about the different things about engineering, but not just that, about life, about programming, about building things, all that good stuff, and obviously having fun. So thank you so much, and until next time, happy Stormworksing, everyone.